Lav atvan kadai, the mivrei b'chu alma. None of you are worthy for God says, to create the world with. Tuna atvan itkari b'chu sheker. All of you are part of the word sheker. Not lie. V'sheker lav ihu kadai l'mekam kamai. And it can't. The sheker can't even come before me. Something which is a lie can't come before me. Vaha ukma. And we've apparently been discussed already previously in the Holy Zohar. It reminds me of the story of the seer of Lublin. So in Lublin, it was a big Jewish town. And the seer, the Jose of Lublin, was a student of the Maggid of Mezrich. Had many Hasidim, and lots of people would come to see him. He was really, really totally amazing. It would be worth traveling around the world many times to just be in his presence. And a lot of people came to see him. And the rabbi of Lublin was very jealous because, he had like a little congregation and no one was really coming to see him. And so he was jealous of the seer. So he comes to the seer of Lublin and he says, this is all a sham. You're not who these people think you are, You should really tell them, like, who you really are. Go tell them what a sin or a bad person you are. He said, the seer of Lublin says, you're totally right. You're right. I'm not a big, I'm just me. You're right, I'm not a big rabbi. I have a lot of tremendous, yeah. So he says, no problem. So he goes out, and he says, listen, it's like 1,000 people there, He says, listen, my friends, I want to tell you, I'm really not a rebbe. I've done all these things when I have this problem, I have this. He goes through his whole litany of his problems. He's really totally like, you shouldn't be here to see me. I'm no better than any. I'm on and on. So the following week, if that week there were 1,000 people, next week there were like 10,000 people. Because he's so completely humble. He's so totally great. He's completely humble and so real. It's like unbelievable. So the rabbi comes back and he says, go out and tell them that you're really great and you're a really big tzaddik and really. And he says, no. He says, I'm not permitted to lie. So, right? V'sheker lav ihu kedai l'mekam kamai. Right. So, truth is not. The truth is the way to go, and sheker. Never mind creating the world from those three. It's fascinating. I don't know. It's a deep thing it's saying here. Why the letters Shin, Kuf, Reish and have to do with sheker? There's something very deep going on here, beyond me a little bit. V'alu Pei and Tzadi. So Pei and Tzadi come next. V'chein Kulu. And all of them. Adamatu Advan La'ot Kaf. Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. Until comes the letter, until they get to the letter Kaf, Chaf, right, not Kuf, Chaf. So Kevan denachat Kaf me'al Kitra. So the Holy Zohar says something really interesting here. It says when God took the letter Chaf from off of his crown. That's interesting. Right? So it has a connotation of God using his hand, so to speak. God doesn't have a hand, right? But, so to speak, he's taking it, and he's taking it off his crown, so to speak, in his hand, the letter that is a hand, a kaf, right? He's taking it, so to speak. It's the first time we have God, he's taking something, or he's doing something from his crown. Izdazu elai v'tatai. The upper and lower world shook when God did this. Wow. Or the upperness and the lowerness shook, whatever it is. It's a very, meaning to say, and I'm sure there's something more technical than this, it's saying that there's something very powerful happened when God took the letter Chaf from off of his crown. Also a connotation that Chaf was the only letter in his crown. It was already, Chaf is somehow already part of God. It's not that, Alu Tlat Atvan, Shin Kuf Reish. these three letters rose and came before God, right? The Matu Advan Lod Kaf, when they got to the letter Chaf, listen, when they got to the letter Chaf, meaning it seems it's already part of God, so the Chaf is intimately connected with God.
So is that because of Keter? It was in his crown because Keter is crown and the Kaf, first letter of Keter?
Absolutely. Very interesting. Sure.
So it doesn't really belong with the Taf and Reish? Or...
Right, I mean, yeah,
Taf
Taf, yeah. It's interesting, right, I mean, then you could, right, for sure. I mean, I think definitely there's a connection, absolutely, for sure. Although, again, Tav and Reish we seem to be in
rejected,
rejected. I mean, they're still beautiful letters, but rejected to create the world with, right? So, and again, I think, truth is, I think the Zohar is doing something very seemingly technical here. Ad v'chulei. Ad de'itkayim kula ba'ot beit. Until, so that's the first, right? So God takes this letter, the letter Chaf, off of his crown, and everything shakes. It shakes everything up. All of a sudden, it's like, wow. All existence shakes from head to toe. And then the next thing the Zohar says, Ad de'itkayim kula ba'ot beit. Everything, now, until we get to the point where de'itkayim kula ba'ot beit. Now, we realize everything stands on the letter beit. So God created the world with the letter beit. Right? The iu simon baracha. It's a simon baracha. Ubei ishtachlal alma v'itbare. And in the letter beit is included the entire, is included all of the world, meaning all of existence, and it was all created with the letter beit. Right? So Bereshit. So it's meaning the Zohar is saying here, it's not a mistake. The Torah starts with beit. Beit is the letter. So we have an interesting connection between the Chaf and the letter beit. It turns out that I can't not mention my dear friends Stan and Levana Tenen, who have spent and are still spending years, tens of years, researching the first pasuk of the Torah. In and of itself, their work is actually proof that the Torah is godly. Because, I mean, you take any book, and fine, you could study it for many years, the book in its entirety. But if I said, even a book I really like Lord of the Rings or something, I'm gonna study the first sentence for 20 or 30 years, and it's gonna keep giving me more and more incredible ideas and more chidushim. It's impossible. It's just not. It's a great book. I'm not knocking it. I love it, but it's just not. It's just not the same at all. And so, what they've done is the very fact that they've been studying and researching this book for that long, and constantly getting new ideas and new insights, is in and of itself phenomenal and a proof that the text is godly. And so I just have to show the book that they came out with. Everyone should get it if you don't have it. The Alphabet That Changed the World. How Genesis Preserves the Science of Consciousness in Geometry and Gesture. Unbelievable, amazing, amazing book. And the basic concept has to do with the beit as the bayit, as the, not just a house, but the act of housing. Every Hebrew letter as an active kind of form. So a house, and I apologize if I'm getting this wrong, but a house is not just a house, it's housing. So what does a house do? And why would God choose to create the world with letter beit? I think the concept is a house creates a separation between inner and outer. And so this is and interestingly enough, our hands are what connect inner and outer. We do things in the world through our hands. And so the beit creates this separation between inside and outside, right? Which is almost in a sense, kind of like the definition of of self-reference, of understanding, of being conscious, is to understand there's me, there's inside and what's here, and then there's outside, right? And my skin, my body is separating that. There's a separation between inner and outer, and then our work in the world is with our hands to take things which are here or here, however big or small, and make them real in the world. And that's our hands. And that's a development. If you look at human consciousness, that's the development of human consciousness. The ability to generate and be inspired and have ideas, right? The inner life, and then its application in the outer world. You can look at all of human development along those lines. And so it's again, I have to reference the Tenon's work, Stan Tenon's work, that they really are onto something awesome here, and it seems very clear that the Zohar is really referencing the same thing. That there's an intimate connection between the letter Chaf and the letter Bey. And so we also, it's interesting, Keter, you see, Keter has to do with the Yud Gimel, I mean, I don't know what it really has to do with. But as far as I know, it has to do with the Yud Gimel Midat HaRachamim. What do I know? So, you know, again, we act in the world. We all go through these incarnations. We're all here for however many times, whatever you want to say. The Arizal says it's only 3 or 4. Interestingly enough. But again, I'm not sure anyone really knows what that means. But fine. Whatever it is, we're here a bunch of times, and we're doing, and we have this experience of being in a world where you have to do stuff. You have to kind of, you know, if you want something, you know, you got to kind of go. You have to do. If I want to play an instrument, I don't just think about it. I have to go pick it up. I have to tune it. I have to have had to prepare it, and I do all this whole. I mean, it's a lot. You know, we go through this whole thing where we're doing, and so how does the doing with our hands, the doing in the world, again, the trying to express the inner, trying to connect the inner to the outer. Well, what does that have to do with the Keter, with Midos Rachum? Again, we go back to the very beginning of this piece in the Zohar. That the whole conception of man from the very beginning, and the whole conception of the Torah is the concept of Erech Apayim, is the concept of compassion. Well, you know, when you actually try to do something in the world, you oftentimes make mistakes. Right? I saw one time an interesting Ein Tzadik Ba'aretz Asher Yaseh Tov V'lo Yechta. I can't remember which Rebbe was. Some maybe lesser known Rebbe. He says, Dafka Yaseh Tov. Right? If you're going to actually do something in the world, then you're going to make mistakes. Ein Tzadik Ba'aretz Asher Yaseh Tov V'lo Yechta. There's no such thing as a tzaddik in the world who actually does good and doesn't make mistakes, and doesn't sin. It's impossible. If you want, he says, as the Rebbe goes on to say, if you want to sit by yourself in a room and learn your whole life, so to speak, you might not do any sins, but you're not going to do any good either. Right? So if you want to do something good in the world, you're trying to do something, you're going to make mistakes. And so you see here, seems like the connection between the hand and God's crown, so to speak, and the emergent quality of God as compassionate and loving and patient, which is from the very beginning, says the Zohar, the whole point of what's going on here. When you do something in the world and you make mistakes, and you see that you've made, when you see others, and it seems a very simple concept, when you see others doing and struggling and working, if you're honest with yourself, then you cannot not have compassion. You will have compassion. You've learned to have compassion because you've made mistakes. You've struggled. You've tried to make things real in the world. So when you see others making mistakes, you can't not have compassion on them because you understand. You have understanding of what they're going through. And so the whole system, the whole incarnation, the whole concept of being here seems to be, at least in some small way, it's probably about many, many, many things, but in a very small way or in a very kind of pointed way, seems to be about us learning to have compassion and patience. And I think that's the interesting part of the mitzvah of Ve'ahavta Recha Kamocha, which is also so important. Loving your fellow as you love yourself. Oftentimes, houses and the walls we put up between us and others, it really separates us in a sense. But when the point of the housing is to give us consciousness, to give us awareness of ourselves, not to separate ourselves from others necessarily. And so when we then go out and do with our hands the chaf, when we do, so we're almost in a sense going over this barrier. We're reaching out from in to out, or sometimes out to in when we're eating or whatever it is, or listening or whatever we're doing. The barrier becomes less, and so I think this is the conception that it's the separation between inner and outer which gives us consciousness, but it's our hands which then goes beyond that separation and shows the interconnectedness of reality. And our hands give us that ability. And that's, again, that has to do with the concept of keter, the concept of compassion. And so the bait is the basic kind of functionality of the world. The housing, the inner and outer. And then the chaf is again, why it's in God's crown, meaning it's the ultimate expression of reality. It's the future of reality. The bait is like is the basis of everything, and then the chaf, the hand, is the goal of everything in a sense. The doing, the learning to have compassion, and so in Mr. Tennant's book, and in the things he's found, the Hebrew letters are formed by a certain shape that has to do with the first line of the Torah, and that shape fits on your hand, and it forms all the letters. It's awesome. It's a really, really awesome concept. When you're looking at the Zohar, and when it's talking about human consciousness, and doing in the world, and the hand, and the letter Beit, Bereshit, and then the very thing that is the expression of our consciousness, our hands, is that which can hold the Hebrew letters. It's very, very incredible, and it's not explicitly referenced here, but it's definitely referenced here. This concept is at least as old as the Zohar, apparently, which, to my estimation, is quite old. And also, but the interesting thing is, like Rabbi Nachman said, it's old and it's also really new. Those are always the really exciting ideas, right? Right? The new ideas you have to be a little careful with, because where are they coming from? The old ideas can sometimes seem really quite boring, because it's old. It's the ideas that are both very old and at the same time very new. Those are the ones, Rabbi Nachman says, those are the ones that are really, really interesting. So I think the Zohar definitely, the Torah falls into that category. And it's both very old and also very new at the exact same time. And definitely the Tenon's work falls into that category. It's both very old and also very new. So just to end, it goes on to talk about the Aleph and why the Itema, the Aleph, Yehu, Reisha, the Chol Advan. Why not start with Aleph? It's the beginning of the alphabet. Right? Why Beit says Aleph? And it's really not clear. I don't understand the answer that they give here. Elo begin to Ikar Beit Arur, because Aleph has to do with the word Arur, cursed. Begin to Aloid Bar Beit Alma, and that's why God didn't use it to create the world. Avagav, the Aleph, Ihu, at the Raza Ilah. The truth is, Aleph represents a very, very deep secret, very, very deep concept, very incredible thing. It couldn't begin to lo me'av duchta l'sitra achra the ikre arur loit bar be alma nishtachla beveit alma beveit bari and because it didn't want to give any strength to the side of negativity, which is called cursed. God didn't use Aleph to create the world, and instead, ve'eshtachla b'veit alma. That instead, the whole world is included in the letter Beit. Beit Bari. It reminds me also of Rabbi Nachman Torah. You have the concept that Yaakov Avinu represents the house, the Bayit. That he represents the first. What was it? Oh God, I can't remember. Avram and Yitzchak represent levels. Yitzchak is a Sadeh. Avram Avinu, I can't remember it. But basically, Yaakov Avinu represents a house. And really, if you think about it, and that's a very approachable relationship we can have with God in terms of a house. And so we think about it, what's so beautiful about, one of the many things so beautiful about being Jewish is that our ways, like our houses become kind of like a temple. You know, it's like the rabbis basically said to the Romans, like, ha, you think you destroyed one temple, sure. It says, we'll give you millions. We're going to make every Jewish household a temple. Because that's really the truth. That was the whole point to begin with. We're hoping that people would look at the Holy Temple and they take it and reflect it back into their own families. And so really, that's one of the most beautiful things about being a Jew and also about being a human being, is our houses, our families, right? And so God created the world with a house, with a family, with a place that people could be together, right? And so, I mean, it may sound kind of corny, but eventually humanity maybe will get to the place that we realize the earth is like one house, you know, that this really is all one kind of family, and in a sense, I mean, that seems to be to get to that place we need a lot of patience. So happy Hanukkah, and thanks for listening. It's good learning.